What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. So please hit that subscribe button, like our content, share it, talk about it, be about it, each one, teach one. And we appreciate your support getting us this far. And if you haven't already, please join our memberships for exclusive content and other great things we're doing here at Unique Access. Now, today, we have the honor and the privilege of being joined by Che Pope. Thank you for coming through, sir.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I wish I had gotten a haircut, but it's okay.
No, no.
That shows I've been working hard.
Yeah, you definitely work hard. And one of the
Yeah.
things that you have going on now is you have a master class through Aulart, a Spanish company out of Europe that I would encourage everybody. There's a link, and we'll put it down there too as well. But definitely check out Che's masterclass because it's 14 chapters and it goes into the business of music. It goes into production, all these different things, some of which we're about to talk about right now. But when I watched it, I was very intrigued on many levels. So on the creation part of it, for your Aulart masterclass, I wanted you to talk about, you talk about making a beat from scratch, making a melody from scratch, and producing vocals are 3 of the 14 chapters. So from a business and a creative perspective, why did you choose those 3 in particular to want to delve into?
I think, when it comes into just the world of songwriting and music creation and then the term production, I think there's the modern definition of it and then there's the original definition of it, right? It was like you had the songwriters and necessarily the producer were not necessarily the same person, right? And then you had your engineers and you had your artists. In the modern sense, it's all jumbled together, and that's fine. And I think that's the progression of technology. But what gets lost in that to me is some of the craftsmanship, and that's why I really wanted to focus on like really specific things to really get into the weeds about the discussion of your people's process, and everyone's process can be different. But the one thing, and in general, with this 100 songs, there's 100,000 songs uploaded daily. I think that was the latest number, is 100,000 songs uploaded daily. Many of them they're not, and I'm not even talking about whether they're a good song or not. I'm just even talking about sonically and how they're put together and things of that nature. So I really wanted to, focus on the craft of it, and that's why.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I think when I was watching it, the master class that you have on Allard is just it's interesting the layers and the different things that you talk about and how you address them, but also a constant theme of it also is the business side of the business.
Yeah.
And it's called the music business for a reason.
For a reason,
It's
exactly.
it's literally 50-50. You have to have one and the other, and they do go together.
Yeah,
So
because if you're weak at one of them, you're going to suffer one. If you're weak at the production, and you might be great at business, but you're weak at production, your business is going to suffer. If you're great at production, but you're weak at business, then your pockets are going to suffer.
yes, and that how because you talk about some of the frustration of the business, but you also talk about a lot of you've obviously clearly had a lot of success throughout your career. So how, as a creative person, have you found you're able to kind of categorize or compartmentalize yourself to not let your personal feelings and
Yeah.
expectations derail your creative side?
I mean, I think we're all human, right? And you go through your range of emotions because that does affect you. It does affect your art, and compartmentalize is a great word because I think that's what you have to do. I have my process in terms of creation, and it actually really interesting thing is like during the pandemic, so many people were inspired to create. They were home, they had time, whatever the case may be, they were inside. So many people were inspired to create. I was the opposite. I think I had been creating for so long, so many years in a row, that it was like my brain actually just kind of shut down from creating. I mean, obviously I was focusing on building a company, but at the same time, that went away from me, for a period of time. And I think that's because I was dealing with so much on the business side of things. So I do think you have to have a process of especially when you do this as a career. Because if you're just someone who loves music and you love, you're excited, you go in your room, you make music. When you do it as a career, the redundancy and the discipline of it becomes a different, your strategies change. It's not just pure off like when the spirit moves you. You have to, sometimes you have to force the spirit, and I think that's where it's necessary to find your process, to find your system. In my case, I read a lot of books. I'm very inspired by reading. I'm very inspired by traveling, and I'm also very inspired by listening, just listening to and being open to discover new music. Um, and I think I was fortunate. I came up in a time where there was a great diversity in music. I feel like one of the things it's lacking right now, as much as there's so much music coming out, there's a lot of redundancy. So you really have to go and find niche music and really mine out, NTS radio and these great KCRW and these places that are really curating, other artists and other experiences more so than just the mainstream stuff, you know.
Yeah. And I think too, this brings up a great point, and you talk about this also in the Aulart Masterclass that you have, is resiliency. Because uh, you know, I have my YouTube channel now, but I've also written more than 3,000 articles. I got like 15 books, and people are
Hey,
always,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
amazing.
thank you. But people are always like, man, how do you do it? And I know you've made thousands of songs, but it's like,
Yeah,
you can't, I think people just, they see the result, but they don't understand or they don't appreciate the process per se.
yeah.
And
I
for,
mean, in my case, I've made 1,000 songs, maybe 10,000 songs, but just to make 100 good ones, you know, I probably have made over 10,000 tracks in my career or something, but probably, my catalog might be 100 songs. I don't know what my catalog is, but it's it is that process because you have to go. And I use the term workout. Hence the name. The reason my company is called Workshop is because I used to call the studio, like I refer to it like the gym. I'm going to work out. So I think you have to go work out, and you have resilience is an incredible word. You have to have that dedication, and you also I use this. I've mentioned this many times in interviews. I think some of the best advice I ever got was from Quincy Jones, where he said, "Don't get too high and don't get too low." So he's like, when things are good, that's great, but don't get too high. When things are bad, same thing. Don't get too low. It's gonna come around. And I think that's always been my kind of approach. But I've also realized that when you're creating, you're taking things out. It's your pork stuff is coming out of you. So you also have to put back into the tank. You also have to put information back in the tank, and that that's inspiration. You know, um, and that's kind of really how I think I've been doing this for 27 years now, and even when I say that, sometimes it scares me. Like I'm like 27 years, geez, you know what I mean? So
yeah, that's crazy. And
yeah,
congratulations, because
thank you.
it is a marathon, not a sprint, to do it
Yeah,
the,
truly.
the last.
Yeah,
Um, and with your masterclass for Allard, you talk about specific tracks, and I wanted you to just briefly talk about a couple of them. With Lauryn Hill, with To Zion, you talk about in there how that was so emotional. And so, since you've made thousands of songs, why does that one stick out so much to make it the indelible on your mind that that's so emotional of
yeah.
a song?
I think when you go into making work with an artist, you're trying to just find that flow with that artist and make it, have a true have a true collaboration. And with that, the artist can reach into what's going on in their lives, and many times it could be a relationship they're having, and so on and so forth. In this case, it was so deep because you're talking about a woman who just had tremendous success, that she was coming off of with the Fugees album, and she had gotten pregnant, and everybody, obviously this is the height of your stardom, and you're taking off, you're like a rocket, everybody around you is like, you know, it's not the time for you to be pregnant, And I'm not, we're not going to get here and start talking about abortion rights or anything like that. But you had all this talk because, you have a major star or a woman about to be this massive star, and everybody's in her ear like, this is not the time for you to have a baby. It's not time for you to, focus on your career, this and that. So when she heard this, when I played her the track, I, unbeknownst to me, she had been looking for a vessel to have a conversation, or a song to create. She had been looking for a song to be the vessel where she had a conversation about this. And so when I played her the track and she started crying, at first I thought, she was like basically like, say like turn that shit off. Like I thought she just really didn't like it because it was different too. I was very in that time. I would experiment with stuff. I'd throw her different things. It's very different than the other stuff we were working on. So when she got so emotional about it, and then she told me why, I think it's forever been just one of my lifelong favorite songs that just resonate. And over the years, I've had some amazing stories of people coming up to me and talking about the record and what it meant to them, and so on and so forth. So when you can make a record that not only touches the artist that you work with, or you and the artist have made this truly emotional piece of art that then resonates with these people, many people in their lives, everyday life. That's the best feeling ever. You
Hmm.
know, I
Yeah.
mean, hit songs are great, and that's great for the wallet. It's great to hear it coming on the radio, but when you have someone thank you in the street and tear up about what that song meant to them, that means everything.
Yeah, because one of my favorite artists of all time and one of my friends, Master Ace, he had an
Yeah.
album called Disposable Arts. And, I think with the 100,000 songs being uploaded today,
Hmm.
we often, I think, have evolved to look at music as disposable. Whereas I think when you and I were growing up, we were like, music was
Yeah.
intrinsic to our lives and it meant and means so
Hmm.
much to us. And I think it still does to people that are younger, but I also think they don't look at it that way, even though it does mean so much to them.
Yeah, I do think it means. I definitely think the young people are still into it, just like this, just like we were in our generation. But I do think that the art level is lacking. And the great thing about when we came up, there was balance. So for every N.W.A, you had a Tribe Called Quest. You know what I mean? So there was just the balance. And right now, what the resources, what the powers that be, and what they're investing the resources in, is it's not balanced. And that therein lies where the issue is. Because if they're like, oh well, this is what's selling, it's like, yeah, but if you market and promote and push more, other things, they'll sell too, you know. And it's like, don't just go with the low hanging fruit and the easy disposable. Again, shout out Master Ace, disposable music. I get it. It's cheap. It's easy. You can throw 100 throws at for every 10 real artists. You can throw 100 disposable artists at the wall and take a shot with, versus really getting behind, you know, an artist that might lead a real recording studio and need real live musicians to play in the studio. These things cost more money and there's more time involved and more development of, more work. Do the work, and that's what's sad about kind of what the industry is at now.
And building on that point, I think it's also evolved so much to where, again, back in the day, there were so many barriers to be able to make a song. First, you needed instruments, then you needed a studio, then you needed to pay for the studio, then you needed to
Yeah.
pay for someone. It was like not only a process, but it was very expensive.
Yep.
And so all these barriers kept, I would say, the wannabes out because it was hard. It
Yeah.
wasn't like,
Yeah.
it's not
And
like
now,
today, you just buy a computer and you're good.
yep. Everybody can make a song. And in some cases, you don't even need a computer.
True.
Yeah.
So that being said, uh, you do talk about in Aulart in your master class the game Higher, and I wanted you that one I always enjoyed because of the piano and some of the musicality on it, and I wanted you to explain on the production side of things in your mind. Game is a gangster rapper, game's hardcore. You're working with Dr. Dre. How do you creatively bring a balance of musicality to this hardcore music with then also on top of that, obviously this is Interscope, this is platinum, you're hoping it's
Yeah.
going platinum, you want it to be on the radio, you want it to be all these things. How do you creatively balance all of that?
Well, in that case, that was a very unique situation. So when I started working with Dre, prior to me working with Dre, I used to work with this this piano player named Mark Batson, piano player, but also songwriter, producer extraordinaire as well. So me and Mark used to collaborate. So when I went in, and Mark has a really unique understanding. He's a guy from Brooklyn, from the projects in Brooklyn, classically trained pianist. You know, like him and Alicia Keys are really close because they're both classically trained pianists. When I went into Dre, and Dre, I met Dre, worked with Dre, I played Dre some music. Dre was like, "Hey, I want you on my personal production team." So it was him and Mike Elizondo at the time, and sometimes Scott Storch. He was like, "Hey, I want you to come in on my personal production team." And I'm coming at that time. I'm coming from Hans Zimmer world. So the great thing about that, especially, and this goes into the higher song specifically, is that I have been exposed to this Hans Zimmer world and all this orchestral production and so forth, and all these different types of sonics. So now you have this young producer, songwriter who's now become aware of so much more in terms of like my paintbrush, if you will. So now when I'm coming to Dre, I'm coming loaded up with Hans sounds and all this whole, I'm working with, I'm more advanced in the technology. Dre still used an MPC 3000 and around the room and external keyboards. I also still used the 3000, but I also was, really moving forward with the computer production, because I had gotten this education at Hans's world, where, like it's almost like a master class itself in the future at the time. So when I started working with Dre, I brought in Mark with me. I was like, I said, I'm down to come in and work on your production team, but let me bring this guy in. If you like him, I think he'd be a great addition to the team too. So I brought Mark with me as well. So when we went to do Higher, the foundation of that track is an orchestra. And when the orchestra's tuned up, they do, sometimes they do different things with the orchestra tune-ups in terms of warm-ups and so forth. And one of the things they did was like kind of an orchestral hit, but it's kind of a different version of it, almost because it's in the tune-up part, so everything's not all tight yet, this and that. And so it's almost a very abrasive orchestra, like a James Brown hit that would be like a bam, bam. This one was almost hostile. So orchestra hat. So the foundation of Higher is this sort of really obnoxious warm-up orchestral hit, layered with some Mark Batson classical piano, with some Dr. Dre drums on it, some Che drums on it, some Che chops on it, some Che, maybe some Elizondo bass, and then you get Higher, and which, becomes this great, and actually was a 50 Cent record first. So 50 wrote the hook on it, but Dre, knowing that we're working on Games project, Dre's one of those people, if this is the project that's up deck, let's use the best stuff that we have for it. So Higher was a 50 record. 50 had actually wrote the chorus for it, and he asked, Dre asked 50 if he could have it for Game, and that's the rest is history.
Be sure to check out the History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
At 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
There will be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on Yo MTV Raps with N.W.A.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The History of Gangster Rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The History of Gangster Rap in stores now.